So I offer my greeting to you. Good morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in Europe. Good late afternoon to our friends in Dubai, India. Good evening to our friends in Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia. A few people down there in Australia. Hope you're all well. Nice to see you. Good late evening to our friends in Australia. I noticed there's a guy called Tim, but he looks like he might be falling asleep. It's a bit late. JC, we have some questions.
Yes, we do, Ajahn. Question 1. Dear Ajahn, thank you for guiding me and introduced me to chanting for my father every morning. I've been doing it every day and Dad has been happy to hear my chant. My problem is now I remember many chants by heart and I seem to do it quite automatically. Sometimes when I was chanting, I caught my mind running through my schedule of the day, what I have to do or where I have to go, and what I have to prepare for my online meeting, etc. I'm trying to pull my mind back, but when I was in trance stage of chanting, it happened again. Please advise. Thank you, Ka.
Yes. So this is what happens is this is what can happen is once we know our chants very well, it becomes possible to be somewhat on autopilot and to be having a parallel thinking process. So a good thing to do at such times is do a different chant. So I think what this lady was saying was trance-like state, meaning that in the past she could experience probably something like upajjhara samadhis, a significant level of collectedness coming from being quite focused on the chanting. And then people can experience rapture and tranquility, serenity while chanting if they're truly with that task or recollecting what it is that we're chanting about. But yes, when we do things a lot, it can get a bit rusty or a bit dull, not as sharp. The mind finds ways to wander. And so this is a good time for chanting one of the suttas or for chanting all of the paritas, for example. So you have to pick up a book and go through the protective chants, the paritas, or what I do here at the monastery to keep it fresh is we do a whole bunch of chants. And so we do the evening chanting on many evenings, but sometimes we just do to Namo Tassa and then we do some other chants. We do the preliminary homage and then we do so the first 3 suttas are very good, Dhammacakka, Pavattana Sutta, and the Anatta and the Aditta Pariyaya. So that's the sutra, excuse me, the sutra on not self and the fire sermon. The reason these chants are so good, so great, so skillful is because even with a little bit of basic Buddhist understanding, we will recognize a lot of these words. Rupang anatta, Vedana anatta, Sanya anatta, Sankhara anatta, Vijnana anatta, not self, not self, not self. We keep putting in this Panya, Sanya, wise perceptions into the mind. So yes, we can alternate or make it that you do a different chant each day. If it's the morning, you do the morning puja one day. The next day you do the morning puja up until Namo Tassa, preliminary homage, and then you do the chanting of the turning of the wheel sermon. And the next day you might do the Sutra Not Self, and the next day you might do the fire sermon, and the next day you might do the 28 Buddhas, Attana, Tiya, protection chant. And then another day you might do 9 Jina Banjara Gathas. So you keep it fresh. And another day you might do what we do here is sometimes we do what's chanted at the funerals, some things from the Abhidhamma, so the contemplation on paticca samuppada, dependent co-arising in forward and reverse. And some of these chants have a really nice rhythm as well. It's quite nice to change the rhythm, change the pace, do a different contemplation with the chant. So we have quite a diverse here at Anandagiri chanting regimen, and it often depends on the mood I'm in. And I do ask the villagers who come to the chant, what would you like to chant this evening? And they'll look at me, they're very sweet, and they'll say, up to the Ajahn, up to the Ajahn. So I get to do what I want to do. Sometimes we do Chinese chanting, sometimes we do Tibetan chanting after the Pali chanting, depending on the lift the faith a bit. So yeah, we can keep it fresh with a bit of variation, and we have a good chanting book here, quite a big, thick one with large writing, so that older aunties can see and keep up. And they're actually pretty good chanters here. So when the monks chant, often in many places, when the monks chant the protective chants, the paritas, just the monks and nuns chant. But here the villagers chant along with us. I've trained them to chant with us. So they're good chanters. And yeah, keep it fresh, change it up a bit. And you know, when you do a Pali chant, which isn't translated, the Dhammacakkassutta, you can read it beforehand in English or Thai, and then chant it, just so that as you're chanting it, you're contemplating the meaning. Because what happens is, as you become familiar with these words, if you just read the English from occasion, you'll know what you're chanting as you chant it, about the cause of suffering and the way to abandon the cause of suffering and the fact of liberation. And then it becomes a very uplifting and profound contemplation while you're chanting. So yes, Anumodana for your daily chanting practice, and good luck keeping it fresh and vibrant.
Thank you, Ajahn. Question to Prajan. In the Cūḻasuññatasutta, the Buddha goes in detail about his meditation on emptiness. He says that he practices it himself. Indeed, it's one of the few meditations he really goes in such instructional description. Can Ajahn tell us more about it and tell us how we can use this meditation ourselves? In particular, is this a meditation or contemplation? And if so, is it conducted in one section, or the different parts are different stages of achievement? Thank you.
So this sutta is one of the most profound, I believe, in the entire Sutta Pitaka, and covers the most profound and subtle phenomenon possible for a conscious being to experience. So it's a very lofty minded subject of contemplation, and there is some value to contemplating it, because I think sometimes we don't give enough thought to the eventual outcome of the practice, like what the goal actually is and what it might be like to realize and experience that goal. So in this sutta, we'll go through it a little bit, but I'll give a little brief synopsis first. Sometimes the languages in the suttas are, it's a bit archaic and repetitive, and it causes us to lose our interest, because we've been so conditioned to be entertained. And so the language in the suttas is very logical, quite scientific and repetitive. And also it was taught in a different language, so sometimes something is lost in the translation in terms of feeling. Like you might notice when you chant the Dhammacakkassutta, Vijja Uddapadi Jnana Uddapadi Aloko Uddapadi. It's got a lovely rhythm, lovely feeling. But when you read it in English, you know, wisdom arose, vision arose. It's a wonderful, profound meaning, but it doesn't have the same feeling. So I'll try to give a brief synopsis of the sutta before we go into the words in the Majjhima Nikaya. So emptiness, suññata, sometimes translated as a voidness. In this sutta, the voidness, it starts with Ananda asking Lord Buddha, Lord Buddha, you once told me that you abide in voidness frequently. Did I understand that correctly? And then the Buddha answers, yes, you did. I do abide in voidness frequently, and I still do. And then he gives an explanation of not just that state, but also of how he realized it. And so he goes through he goes straight from seclusion in the forest to becoming one pointed on earth element meditation, which probably took him up to the fourth jhana. And then he goes through the 4 arupa jhanas, and then through contemplating the arising and cessation of the final arupa jhana, the base of neither perception or non-perception, he abandons the asavas, kama asava, bhava asava, avijja asava, the sensuality, becoming, and ignorance, and through that attains to voidness. So it's if I've understood it correctly, it's another description of nibbana. So in answer to the question, can we do this as a contemplation and can we do this as a practice? Unfortunately, most of us do not yet have nibbana as a meditation, something that we can place our minds in. But the contemplation of it is valuable, and a glimpse at where this practice goes and how profound it is and what our goal is. So I'll start. So it's the Majjhima Nikaya, Sutta number 121, the Cūḻasuññatasutta, and I'll just read the first couple of paragraphs. Thus have I heard, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in the Eastern Park, in the palace of Migara's mother. So the palace of Migara's mother was a monastery sponsored by Visakha in a forest in Savatthi. Then when it was evening, the Venerable Ananda rose from meditation, went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the Sakyan country, where there is a town of the Sakyans named Nagaraka. There, Venerable Sir, I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. Now, Ananda, I often abide in voidness. Did I hear that correctly, Venerable Sir? Did I learn that correctly? Attend to that correctly? Remember that correctly? Certainly, Ananda. You heard that correctly, learned that correctly, attended to that correctly. As formerly, Ananda, so now too, I often abide in voidness. And then Lord Buddha explains, just as the palace of Migara's mother, the monastery, is void of elephants, cattle, horses, and mares, void of gold and silver, void of the assembly of men and women, and there is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the Sangha of bhikkhus. So I'm just going to explain that a bit. Lord Buddha is talking about what's absent in the forest monastery, essentially. There's no horses, there's no cattle. So understanding what would have been present in a town or a village in India, the chatter of people, the noise of livestock, the markets, the traveling to and fro. So he's saying, notice this absence of this phenomenon. And then he's saying, but there is still the presence of bhikkhus. But by not attending to the perception of the village, not attending to the perception of people, attending to in singleness dependent on the perception of forest, his mind enters into the perception of forest and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be dependent on perception of village, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of people, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of forest. He understands his field is void of perception of village, is void of the perception of people. There is only the singleness dependent on the perception of forest. He regards it as void of what is not there, but as to what remains, he understands that which is present. This is present, mindfulness and clear comprehension. So it goes from there to a bhikkhu, not attending to the perception of people, not attending to the perception of forest, attains to the singleness dependent on the perception of earth. So it is good to give a little bit of commentary on this. So, because Lord Buddha, such an advanced spiritual practitioner, he jumps over these preliminary steps on occasion so quickly. And this is actually where we need to be doing most of our work. So I don't want to jump over it quite so quickly. One notices Lord Buddha praises solitude, Kaya Viveka. So taking some time alone each day, which is what we do when we meditate. The reason we do that is so that we can try to establish Chitta Viveka, which is the aloofness of the mind from the 5 hindrances. And so it's helpful. It's just helpful not to be attending to relationships and not to be in a noisy place when you're trying to make your mind somewhat collected and clear. And then he says, in going to a more peaceful place, essentially, the forest surrounded by bhikkhus is more peaceful than the village. He attains the single pointed concentration on earth elements. So the way that's done, although it's not mentioned here in the sutta, the way that's done it's very interesting, is that is what is being praised by monks in the lineage of Luang Por Mun who have practiced very well and received great results from their practice. So the way they establish the awareness of the earth element is in body contemplation. So when monks become monks, it's part of our ceremony that our preceptor gives the meditation as he makes the monks repeat: hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin as the first 5 objects of meditation. What you'll notice, that's part of the bhikkhu's ordination ceremony, and what you'll notice about that is that those things are earth element. And so if a monk is diligent, a monk or a novice or a bhikkhuni is diligent in applying their mindfulness to see these things as earth element as they are, the mind can become one pointed on that, and that would be a jhanic state. And that jhanic state can be taken to the level of the 4th jhana, which is pure equanimity. And so Lord Buddha then describes the next 4 arupa jhanas. So one thing I need to say about the arupa jhanas before we contemplate them is they are an extremely lofty spiritual accomplishment. So, and there's it's a bit of a tricky territory because there's a lot of misunderstanding, or should I say, overestimation. And sometimes I don't like to talk about how I understand how rare these accomplishments are, because it can seem a little disheartening. Like, if very few people left in the world attain to these things, it seems like we're living in a little bit of a somewhat bereft spiritual situation. So it wasn't like the time of the Buddhas, in the time of the Buddha, where so many people had these spiritual accomplishments. But to my understanding, most of the current generation of arahants have up to the 4th jhana. So this is really important for but the reason I am going to talk about it is because I have a love of truth and a commitment to truth. And I think that speaking truthfully has a very particular resonance, which is powerful. And the people who will get it will benefit from it, even if a whole bunch of other people are somewhat disappointed or offended. One has to navigate this territory. So a lot of other people might be willing to let people overestimate their practice rather than give the tough love talk about what is possible in this day and age. But I personally believe that if we are realistic about what is possible with confidence and optimism, because great things still are possible, but we need to do our work where the work needs to be done without delusion. And so that's why I am going to speak over these things. And because there are certain lay teachers in America who are teaching retreats on the 8 jhanas, and certain people who attend those retreats believe that they are experiencing them when they probably are not. Just for a bit of perspective, the arahants that I personally know probably have up to the 4th jhana. And what's interesting to note is that is enough. That was enough for them to purify their mind of greed, hatred, and delusion, and to liberate themselves. So they have up to the 4th jhana, and they definitely also have the voidness, which is the last, where this sutta ends. The Lord Buddha's abiding in voidness. These arahants definitely can also abide in the realization of voidness. But in the time of the Buddha, people with vast accumulated merits and a lot of meditation practice behind them, those are the ones who had the merit to meet a teaching Buddha. So you have people with great spiritual accomplishments. I know of, after living in Thailand for 25 years, I know of 2 people who have arupa jhanas. Just for a bit of context. And so yes, after this, again, Ananda, a bhikkhu not attending to the perception of forest, not attending to the perception of earth, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of base of infinite space. So, one moment, I'm just going to make sure I have to be very careful when talking about the most profound subjects. So allow me to take a few moments. Lord Buddha is explaining that when establishing his perception upon earth, he's not attending to ridges and hollows, tracts of stumps and thorns, uneven places. So his one phrase Lord Buddha often says is not delighting in perceptions of diversity, delighting in perception of non-diversity. So it means just taking the simple earth element as its nature without giving a lot of attention to the what Lord Buddha is explaining, ravines and valleys and various things. So it's just taking earth as earth, being mindful of it, becoming concentrated upon it. And with Lord Buddha's particular ability, the reason when he goes from awareness of earth element then to the infinite base of consciousness, I would say that he was aware of all of the earth elements of the planet, for example, and in all beings. He's a very, very profound, he has a very vast mind. So for him, then he is able to go from awareness of earth to awareness of the base of infinite base of consciousness. So that's a very, just consider those words, infinite base of consciousness, infinite. You know, we struggle so much with our thoughts and our desires and our negative habits and mulling over the past and being worried about the future. So much of our life ruminating over these mundane things. But it's very interesting and encouraging to consider that a human being, conscious human being, can take the infinite base of consciousness as a meditation object. So in that experience, there won't be a perception of bodies, there won't be a perception of earth. It's essentially the awareness and the concentration is becoming more subtle and more profound at each of these steps. But infinite means boundless. So compare that to our habitual experience of contractedness, limitation. And just understand that a cultivated mind can take boundless, radiant luminosity as its object. So Lord Buddha explains that he did that. And then he says, by not attending to the perception of earth, by not attending to the perception of the base of infinite space. Yeah, sorry. So the first one is infinite space. Lord Buddha takes, after earth, he takes space. You can imagine doing that just as an imagination. Imagine being mindful of all of the earth elements in the earth, and all of the earth element in beings as just earth. That's the bones, the teeth, the hair. And then not giving attention to that, giving attention then, once the mind is established on that, giving attention to the space that exists within. And then taking space, empty space, as the meditation object. And then taking it a bit more refined, taking consciousness that pervades all of space as the object. Luminous, radiant, boundless. And then he does that to the next two arupa jhanas, which is so we have infinite space, infinite consciousness, then we have the base of nothingness. I literally don't even know what that means really, but I trust that if it's more profound than the infinite base of space and the infinite base of consciousness, that there's a very subtle type of bliss associated with it. But I'm sure many of us feel like we'd like to have a break sometimes. I mean, wouldn't it be great to take the infinite base of nothingness as an object for a period of time, just to have a break from it all? Pressing pause. Don't have to listen to my complaining relatives, my complaining husband or wife, my kids, the monks, or we're just going to go into nothingness for a few days. Come out, world and beings again, okay. And then an even more subtle one, the base of neither perception or non-perception. So I don't think we can really know we can't understand conceptually what that means, the base of neither perception or non-perception, but what you can understand is that it's more profound and more subtle than the base of infinite space, the base of infinite consciousness, the base of infinite nothingness. It's an even more subtle spiritual level of concentration, the eighth non-arupa jhana. So then we'll go towards the end of the sutta where Lord Buddha sees even the conditionality. And this is very interesting, that because spiritual practitioners, in a way, Ajahn Biak said this is encouraging, so I'm glad I remembered it. Lord Biak has said that it is good in a way that most of us don't have these really profound concentrations too quickly. Why? It's because they delude the mind. Can you imagine? So Ajahn Anan also said to me, he said, some of the most stubborn beings in the universe to teach are Brahmadevas. Because Brahmadevas have access. Can you imagine being able to go into the infinite base of space, or the infinite base of consciousness, the infinite base of nothingness, whenever you wanted to? Because you've meditated so much, you've developed so much samadhi parami, you have so much adept skill in this area. On one in-breath, infinite base of consciousness, luminous, radiant, boundless, no cause suffering. The only suffering existence in such an experience is the fact that it ceases. But within the experience itself, it's very, very blissful, very, very difficult to detect the suffering in such a illustrious spiritual accomplishment. So a being who has that kind of development is going to feel pretty happy with it. And Ajahn Anan explained that these Brahmadevas, if they have to come back to the earth element, their minds become so accustomed to these refined samadhis, they leave home, they go off into the forest, they eat leaves, they eat berries, they wear one loincloth, and within not a very long time, they attain jhanas again. And then they're so happy with their mental bliss and contentment and samadhi, then when they die, they go straight back up to the Brahma realm, and till the end of the eon, sometimes eons. So, and there's no coarse greed, there's no coarse irritation or aversion. And so it's very difficult for them to contemplate the fact of suffering, and very difficult also to contemplate not self, because there is still this vanity, subtle quality of vanity associated with boundless, radiant, infinite space. So Lompo Biek says, as much as that sounds nice, boundless, radiant, infinite space, Lompo Biek says it's good that we don't have access to it yet. Because we, in developing the lower levels of samadhi and the beginning stages of insight, then you have a good chance of experiencing some vipassana jnana, insight knowledge. So this comes with patiently being aware of feelings as they arise and cease, arise and cease, arise and cease. So the fact that you have to try hard to experience some contentment, some peacefulness, that you have to work with pain, difficult, painful emotions, but you can watch them arise and cease, then you actually have a really good opportunity to develop vipassana jnana, insight knowledge, which will help to chip away and destroy at ignorance and delusion, which is the cause of rebirth. So it's good to be optimistic about what our particular situation has as its potential. And there is rich potential in our situation, which if we understand fully, we will enthusiastically embrace our practices and work ploddingly towards these illustrious states of samadhi. And but we try to develop mindfulness, clear comprehension, wisdom, and samadhi together, the Eightfold Path. So yes, going this towards the end. Again, Ananda, a bhikkhu, not attending to the perception of the base of nothingness, not attending to the perception of the base of neither perception or non-perception, attends to the singleness dependent on the signless concentration of mind. His mind enters into that signless concentration of mind and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus, the signless concentration of mind is conditioned and volitionally produced. But whatever is conditioned and volitionally produced is impermanent, subject to cessation. When he knows and sees thus, his mind is liberated from the taint of sensual desire, from the taint of being, and from the taint of ignorance. So, very important sentence in the sutta. By seeing the conditionality even of the most profound and subtle concentrated state, Lord Buddha or the practitioner is able to abandon kama asava, sensuality, bhava asava, the taint of being or becoming, and avijja asava, ignorance. So that's another way of saying the mind is purified and liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge, it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed, the holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the taint of sensual desire, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the taint of being, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the taint of ignorance, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely that connected with the 6 bases that are dependent on the body conditioned by life. So Lord Buddha is explaining that the mind is purified and liberated. But because the conditioner still has a body, the result of past karma, there is still the impingement that comes from sensory contact. He understands the field of perception is void of the taint of sensual desire. The field of perception is void of the taint of being. The field of perception is void of the taint of ignorance. There is present only this non-voidness, namely that connected with the 6 sense bases, dependent on the body and conditioned by life. Thus he regards it as a void of what is not there, but as to what remains there, he understands that which is present. Thus, this is present. So he has mindfulness and clear comprehension. This is genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness, supreme and unsurpassed. So it's an interesting word, voidness, because it sounds so unappealing. It sounds like a negation. It sounds like nothing much in particular. what's very important to understand is it's another way that Lord Buddha is describing Nibbana, the unconditioned, which has an empty nature. And so what I think we need to contemplate in terms of inspiring and encouraging ourselves is there is a purified and liberated mind that is experiencing voidness. Another sutta which gives us a glimpse into the wonderfulness of voidness, there's a sutta where Sariputta is abiding in voidness, the same voidness, essentially the liberated state of the Arahant. And thousands of Brahma Devas come to revere and pay respect to him. And they say, when they go and see the Buddha afterwards, Sariputta's mind was so radiant and bright and vast. And these are Brahma Devas with vast, radiant minds. They say, we've never seen anything so beautiful. We respect this. We wanted to pay our respects to it. And we have no idea from where it shines. So these are the beings in the higher Brahma realms, the highest part of samsara, and they see something brighter. And so this is coming from the unconditioned. This is coming from the realization of emptiness. This is coming from voidness. So it's good to understand that realizing and experiencing voidness and abiding in that emptiness, ultimate empty nature of phenomena, it's important to understand that there is a purified mind experiencing that, and there's a complete absence of suffering. And it's sometimes described as unshakable peace. And wouldn't that be nice? I mean, how much of our peace that we experience is a little bit fragile? Wouldn't it be nice to have a fully established, unshakable peace experienced by a liberated mind? And so that's what Lord Buddha had access to. That's what Sariputta had access to. That's what the Arahants have access to. With regards to the question, can we do this as a contemplation and as a meditation? Not yet, not at our level. But don't be disheartened, because whatever samadhi that you can experience, whether it's momentary or neighborhood or the first jhana, it's all good and wholesome, and allowing the mind to abide in that. It's interesting that there is some, in terms of an experience, there is some experience of emptiness. There is some experience of spaciousness when the mind begins to collect. So it's not like there's none of this there. It's just not the purest, most refined, fully developed form of it. But when you experience 5 minutes of peacefulness, when you're chanting and you're meditating, you'll notice there's less contraction. There's more of a sense of space. There's more of a sense of light. There's more of a sense of rapture. And it's so, and when we bring our mind to whatever level of peacefulness that we can experience, that is what's conditioning the mind to be able to go have deeper experiences of samadhi. And there'll be more of a sense of emptiness and more of a sense of infinite space and luminous consciousness. So I think we should be enthusiastic about the potential of the mind to experience illustrious, wondrous, beautiful states, and have confidence that it's a trick. You see, it's a bit tricky because we have to be content with the amount that we have and abide in that frequently, because that's what lays the causes for it to deepen and get more and more wonderful over time. And but again, for a bit of perspective, it's not necessary to have the arupa jhanas. It is possible to have the fourth. It is possible. Ajahn explains that it's possible to attain to stream entry. Very important in this day and age for people who have a lot of thinking. It's possible to attain to stream entry with upajjhara samadhi. So that means neighborhood concentration. Not even the first jhana, almost first jhana, and that's what many people will have some access to. So it's good to be confident, but the point is one needs to bring one's concentration to that level frequently. And then if one does attain to the change of lineage and the Sotapanna path, then attaining to the first jhana after that point, abiding in the first jhana after that point won't be difficult, because one has so much confidence in the path and in the Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and knows the correct way to practice. And so it's much more easy to pacify doubts and restlessness and bring up that recollection which brightens and gladdens the mind. So we do have within our potential in this day and age to experience vipassana insights, to experience kanika and upajjhara samadhi, and particularly in retreats or during longer intensive times of practice, people can have experience of the first jhana. And then that gives a foundation for the investigation. And please notice again that Lord Buddha says becoming aware of earth as just earth is an important part of experiencing insight into not self. And so the way the forest masters have done this, of course, is body contemplation, particularly contemplating teeth and bones and seeing them clearly as they are. And that has led to seeing the nature of the body, has led to many great monks and nuns attaining to liberating insights, establishing them in nirvana, at least in the first couple of stages. So I hope that answered the question about the Cūḻasuññatasutta to some degree. And I hope that which is Sutta number 121 in the Majjhima Nikaya. And may we all progress on the path to experiencing voidness, so that the Brahma Devas will come and pay respects to your radiant mind experiencing not self.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Oh, that was hard.
Ajahn, question 3. I wonder why all Buddha images have hair or some sort of covering on them. Mahayana, Theravada plus Tibetan alike. Monks in general all have clean shaven heads, and it is also a requirement for a left-hand person. Thank you.
So it's always good to have a silly question after a profound question, isn't it? So apparently, when the Bodhisattva cut off his long hair when he was a prince, he cut off his hair with a sword. After that point, his hair, what remained of his hair became tight coils. And apparently, according to the legend, the Buddha never had to shave his hair. It stayed in that state of tight little coils, which were close to his head. So Lord Buddha's hair apparently did have it was different to the other bhikkhus. Why or how, I don't know. But we do understand that Lord Buddha cultivated virtue for 4 incalculable periods plus 100,000 eons, and there's all sorts of qualities that bodhisattvas have to develop to become Buddhas, and then there's all sorts of merits and abilities that they have, and then all sorts of consequences of those merits and those abilities. So we can deduce that it was something to do with the specialness of Buddhas. And I think they have 32, I can't remember how many signs, special signs, like the longer earlobes. And I think they have a Dharma wheel on the bottom of their feet. Very interesting. And so yes, but we're going to give our attention to the teachings of the Buddha and the path that he laid down, and not his hair. Which was blue-black, apparently.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, question number 4. Dear Ajahn, thank you for the fortnight teachings. I would like to know if we should always dedicate merits after daily chanting meditation. Should we always include all deceased parents, relatives, and those living who are close to us? What happens if the list is long? What is the best way to make dedication? Thank you.
Yes. So one of the things that I do, because it makes it a little more simple. So I think it is good when you have time, particularly for parents and teachers, people who are dear to you, to specifically dedicate merits. But another thing I do, sometimes we're a bit busier, or sometimes it's nice to keep it simple. So one of the things that I do is at the end of my meditation, I make a simple dedication. All of those beings karmically connected to me. And I actually say, through wholesome or unwholesome acts, may they receive the benefits of my practice. So in a way, when beings karmically connected to you through wholesome acts, so your parents who gave you your body, your opportunities, and your teachers, etc., they automatically get some. The people who are supporting you automatically get some. But then also because we have some people who may obstruct us if we harm them in past lives. So dedicating merit to beings who we are connected to through negative actions, harmful things that we did, or beings that wish us harm. We also dedicate merit to them as well. So that's a nice, simple way of covering all the bases. Dedicate merit to all beings karmically connected to me through wholesome, neutral, or unwholesome actions of body, speech, and mind. May they all be well, may they be happy, may they be free from suffering.
Thank you, Ajahn. Ajahn, next question. Hi, Ajahn. Thanks for answering my question. It means a lot. May I know, must one develop right concentration through meditation or in day activities? One can also attain to jhana stage. In fact, I'm curious, how will one know if he or she has reached jhana stage? Thank you.
So there's an interesting story. Apparently back at Ajahn Chah's monastery, there was one monk who had such amazing samadhi that when he was sweeping leaves, he would go into jhana. But what's interesting is when he went into jhana, that means he would stay still, perfectly still. So Ajahn Chah, seeing that this monk needed to develop more mindfulness and wisdom, as well as, because he already had a good foundation of samadhi, he made him his attendant for a period of time where this monk had to pay attention to the needs of the Ajahn and had to be there to take care of him at a set time. So he forced this monk to pay attention to things outside of his beautiful collected mind. So obviously that's not the challenge that most of us have. But the reason I bring it up as a story is, if you're attaining jhana in daily activities, you won't be aware of outside objects. So basically, no. Very rare occasion of this one monk that stood still with his eyes closed and was very inward when he was in his jhanic state. So can one develop jhana through daily activities? I would say very rare, very difficult. And people who are extremely gifted or who have done a lot of practice in past lives, they can enter jhana with kind of one mind moment. So I think monks of the caliber of Ajahn and Lompo Biek, they can be entering jhana and coming out of jhana very quickly. But these are people who have completely finished their work. They're very, very developed beings. So most people have to put forth a lot of effort to experience actual genuine jhana. As I was talking about earlier, there is a lot of overestimation. I'm not saying that people aren't experiencing some concentration, but for example, if you're experiencing Khanika Samadhi, momentary samadhi, some people are interpreting that as the first jhana. And then if you're experiencing Upachara Samadhi, 20 minutes of fairly peaceful mind states with only wholesome thoughts, some people are thinking that's the second or third jhana. And this is where it can be helpful to have a teacher who can see these things and explain what they are accurately. So there's nothing wrong with experiencing some concentration. It's wonderful. It's praised by Buddha, Lord Buddha. But it can be problematic if we overestimate what we're experiencing, because it's a kind of a spiritual disaster if we come to this practice wanting to lessen our vanity and lessen conceit and uproot attachment to trying to be special or thinking that we're special. And if at a certain point in our spiritual development, we begin to experiencing something which is kind of not yet on the truly profound, has the potential to become profound, but we start to think it's profound, inevitably when there's still a lot of self there, there's going to be some vanity and conceit attaching to that. And it's a real minefield and it's a real disaster. So most people, that's what I'm saying, I'm just going to be frank and truthful, say things according to my understanding, having studied this for 25 years and having knowing people who have finished their work. And people who have jhana are very rare in this day and age. And most people will be experiencing kanika and upajjhara samadhi. Some people will be experiencing the first jhana in retreat-like situations. The occasional rare person who came into this world with a lot of practice from past lives, such people do exist, and they may have, but how do you know if you have jhana? So there's none of the 5 hindrances at all. So there's no sensual craving, there's no irritation or aversion, there's no restlessness or worry, there's no sleepiness or dullness, and there's no doubt at all. So, I mean, whatever peaceful state that you're experiencing, just have a look. Are there any of these things occurring, even in subtle manifestations? Because if they're occurring in subtle manifestations, that would mean it's upajjhara samadhi, it's not yet the first jhana. And I don't say that to discourage anybody. I'm saying that whatever peacefulness you have is wonderful, but I don't want anybody to add vanity or conceit or create a special sense of self on top of it. I want you to go further and abandon even the subtle manifestations of hindrances. And some people apparently can still hear noises when they're in the first jhana, some awareness of sounds, but there won't be a feeling of a self listening. There'll be presence of mind which is still and stable. That's the object. The peace becomes the object. And there might be awareness of noise, but there won't be a feeling of being a self who's hearing or listening, just awareness of noise. Some people say it's a bit like experiences falling down a well, except that there's no pain involved. But there's that feeling of being in a deep, deep collected state that's immovable for a period of time. And then the mind will come up out of that experience. So when I've had some experience under the Bodhi tree of, I believe, this first level of jhana, it was somebody on 2 occasions, somebody who I knew raised their voice and called my name. And there was this awareness that there was awareness of hearing, and then a good number of moments later, there was awareness of a person who I know. But I was aware that if I wanted to talk to that person, it would be a period of minutes before I could formulate a thought to actually even consider. Like it wasn't an option to open my eyes, and thoughts were not there ready to be articulated. It would have taken a period of minutes setting the intention. Okay, I want to say hello to this person. It would take minutes to come out of that peaceful state and begin to think. So that's the degree to which. There was another time I had a very peaceful sit, and it was closing time, and somebody came up to me. It was very interesting. So I was like, "Are you Ajahn?" And are you Ajahn? And it's kind of like, you haven't been sitting there thinking, I'm Ajahn. Yeah, I'm Ajahn. It's like, I'm kind of looking at this person. I'm like, oh yeah, Ajahn. That guy. She's like, could I talk with you? And I thought, it's not going to work today, because thought constructs had been so pacified. Mine was in a very, very spacious, probably still in Upacara Samadhi. I'm like, okay, so let's make a meeting tomorrow, this time tomorrow. I'll set the intention. Very nice lady who'd spent time in our monasteries in Europe and Thailand. And yes, I was happy to chat with her, but could not have had a conversation with her in that moment. So, you know, when the mind picks up peacefulness as its object, thought formations are very, very significantly pacified. And another time a person came and tapped me on the leg, very inappropriate behavior when somebody's meditating, but a monk came and tapped me on the leg. Hey, are you that monk, the disciple of Ajahn? And there was just this vague awareness. I'm going to say vague, because it's not vague, there's a lot of clarity present. But there was an aloof and distant awareness that a conventional being was tapping on my leg, but it was not possible to answer. So that's the kind of collectedness and presence of mind and stillness, and that's just the first jhana. So just to give people a bit of a sense of how still and how peaceful these experiences are. But, and for myself to have access to that experience with some regularity requires me to be meditating 8 or 9 hours a day for at least 10 days. That's when it begins to become possible. So I'm talking to you as someone who meditates 4, 5, 6 hours a day, every day for 25 years. And so whatever peacefulness you have, wonderful. Keep enjoying it, keep cultivating it, and trust that it will deepen by itself over time. And we need to develop our insight and our awareness of arising and ceasing and not self, and contemplate these things at the same time, so that when you get to that point to enter Nibbana or become attached to jhanas, you'll take and become a Brahmadeva who becomes stubborn and unteachable, that you'll make the choice to see the conditionality and abide in voidness. Yes, I hope that answered the question about whether or not this person has jhana. And I want to encourage you all. I would love it if you have jhana, but you probably need to meditate a lot. Yeah. Okay, so I'll say goodbye now.
Good night, Prajan.
Nice spending time with you
Good
all.
rest.
Thank you. Take care. Keep meditating.
Good night. Take care, everyone. Good
Take
night,
care.
Frank. Take care, Frank.
Okay, thank you.
See you, Joyce. Next Tuesday.